My name is Alina Mercer, and the first time I truly owned it, I was 14 years old, sitting in a juvenile court while a judge decided whether I was worth keeping. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and broken promises. My mother sat 3 rows back, her hands folded in her lap like she was at a church service instead of the systematic dismantling of our family. My father stood by the window, his back to me, watching the parking lot as if his car might offer him an escape route that his conscience couldn't provide. The judge was a woman with reading glasses that caught the fluorescent light at sharp angles. She had kind eyes, which somehow made what she was about to say even worse. She cleared her throat, and I remember thinking that sound, that small administrative throat clearing, would be the punctuation mark on my childhood. In the matter of the Mercer family dissolution, she began, and I felt something inside me go very still, not calm, still, like water before it freezes. Due to irreconcilable differences and the parents' explicit refusal to continue custodial responsibility, temporary guardianship is hereby transferred to Cuyahoga County Child Services, effective immediately. I raised my hand, like I was in school, like this was a question I could answer my way out of. Your Honor, I can be better. I can be quieter. I can need less. I can— Ms. Mercer, she interrupted, not unkindly. This isn't about your behavior. Your parents have made their decision. Their decision. Not mine. Never mine. I looked back at my mother. She was crying, but silently, the way you cry at a funeral when you want people to notice your grief, but not your guilt. My father still faced the window. I wanted him to turn around. I wanted him to see me one last time as his daughter, instead of as a problem he'd successfully delegated to the state. He never turned around. The judge signed something. The social worker, a tired woman named Alana Brooks, who I would come to know very well, came forward with a folder. Inside were documents with my name on them, Alina Mercer, over and over, in legal language that transformed a child into a case number, a family into a file. The court recognizes that this is difficult, the judge continued, but sometimes the most loving thing parents can do is acknowledge their limitations. Limitations. That's what I was. Not a daughter. A limitation. I remember thinking, they're signing papers to leave me, and the system is signing papers to keep me. Everyone gets to sign except me. Everyone gets a say except me. That was the day I learned that love is a contract, and sometimes one party simply chooses not to renew. The foster home was a large Victorian house on the east side, run by a couple named the Hendersons. They were professional foster parents, the kind who had converted their lives into a rotating door of temporary children, each one a stipend, each one a tax deduction, each one a story they could tell at church functions about their charitable work. Mrs. Henderson showed me to my room. It was clean, impersonal. The walls were painted a color that couldn't decide if it was blue or gray, so it just hovered in between, non-committal. There was a desk, a bed, a dresser. On the door, someone had taped a welcome poster with my name written in cheerful purple marker, except it wasn't my name. It said, "Welcome, Alina." Such a small thing. One letter, the Y, where an I should be. But in that moment, standing in that gray-blue room that smelled like industrial air freshener, staring at my name spelled wrong by people who were being paid to care about me, I understood something fundamental. Nobody had actually seen me. Not my parents, who found me easier to abandon than to understand. Not the court, which processed me like paperwork. Not even these foster parents, who couldn't be bothered to check the spelling of my name before making their cheerful welcome sign. I was a placeholder, a fill-in-the-blank, a Mad Lib where the specifics didn't really matter. My hands were shaking as I took the marker from the desk. I crossed out the Y. I wrote an I above it. Then I traced over Alina 3 times, pressing so hard the marker squeaked against the poster board. "Alina," I whispered. "My name is Alina." It felt like reclaiming something, or maybe claiming it for the first time. Mrs. Henderson came back with fresh sheets. "Oh, you fixed the typo," she said brightly. "Sorry about that. I'm terrible with spelling." She wasn't sorry. Not really. It was the kind of casual apology people give when the mistake costs them nothing to acknowledge, and even less to make. But for me, that correction was everything. It was the first time in weeks, maybe years, that I had asserted anything about myself. The first time I had said, "This is who I am, and you will call me by my actual name." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. I would never again let someone misspell me. Not my name, not my life, not my story. I would learn to document everything. I would learn that paper is power, that records are weapons, that the best revenge isn't hot and explosive, it's cold and precisely filed. But I didn't know that yet. Not fully. First, I had to learn a different kind of precision. The high school I attended had a vocational program, and because I was a county kid now, I got to pick an elective. Most foster kids chose cosmetology or auto shop, trades that promised immediate employment, practical skills, an escape route from the system. I chose ceramics. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the idea of making something beautiful out of dirt. Maybe it was the quiet of the studio, the way the wheel hummed instead of shouted. Maybe it was just that the ceramics teacher, Mr. Yarrow, had kind hands and didn't ask questions about why I was always the first one there and the last one to leave. He taught us to center clay on the wheel. It's harder than it looks. You have to press down and in simultaneously, finding the exact balance between force and grace. Too much pressure and the clay collapses. Too little and it wobbles off-center, impossible to shape. Ceramics is about control, Mr. Yarrow said, but also about surrender. You guide the clay, but the clay teaches you. I didn't understand what he meant until I broke my first real piece. It was a bowl. Simple, unglazed. I'd spent 3 weeks on it. Throwing, trimming, drying, firing. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd made it with my own hands, and that meant something. I was carrying it from the kiln when my elbow caught the edge of a table. The bowl fell, shattered. Pieces scattered across the concrete floor like shrapnel. I stood there, staring at the fragments, and something in me cracked too. I felt the tears coming. Hot, humiliating, disproportionate. It was just a bowl. Just clay. But it was also 3 weeks of focus, 3 weeks of having something that was mine, 3 weeks of building something that couldn't be taken away unless I was careless enough to drop it. And I had dropped it. "Accidents happen," Mr. Yarrow said, appearing beside me with a broom. "I'm so stupid," I managed. "I'm so—" "You're not stupid. You're learning." He swept the pieces into a dustpan, but instead of throwing them away, he carried them to a metal shelf in the back of the room. There was a box there labeled "broken." "We keep them," he explained. "Nothing is wasted here." That's when I met Lainey Hart. She was the studio manager at Rust Belt Arts College, where Mr. Yarrow also taught evening classes. She'd come to pick up some supplies, and she saw me standing there, crying over broken pottery like it was a dead pet. "You're the girl with the bowl," she said. I nodded, mortified. She picked up one of the larger fragments, turned it in her hands, studied it. "You know what kintsugi is?" I shook my head. "It's a Japanese technique. When something breaks, you repair it with gold lacquer. The idea is that the breakage becomes part of the object's history. The cracks are highlighted instead of hidden. The piece becomes more valuable because of its flaws, not despite them." She handed me the fragment. "Don't throw this away," she said. Learn to mend it. One day, you'll understand that broken things can be more beautiful than things that never broke at all. I kept that piece. Carried it with me through 3 more foster placements, 2 social workers, and eventually to the aging out apartment the county set me up in when I turned 18. And when I was 19 and enrolled at Rust Belt Arts College on a vocational scholarship, the first person I looked for was Lainey Hart. She remembered me. "The crying girl," she said with a smile that held no mockery. "Did you keep the piece?" I showed her. I'd carried it in my pocket so long the edges had worn smooth. "Good," she said. "Now let me teach you what to do with it." Kintsugi, I learned, is not quick. It's not easy. It requires patience, precision, and a willingness to sit with brokenness long enough to transform it. The lacquer is mixed with gold powder. Real gold, though you can use brass or copper if gold is too expensive. You trace the cracks, fill them, let them cure. Each layer takes time. Each application requires a steady hand. "Most people want to hide damage," Lainey said as she demonstrated. "They want to pretend the break never happened, but that's not strength. Strength is saying, yes, I broke, yes, I bled. And look, I'm still here, and I'm beautiful because of it, not despite it." I understood then why she'd remembered me, why she'd told me to keep the fragment. She'd seen something in me that I was only beginning to see in myself. The potential for transformation. The possibility that my breaking wasn't an ending but a beginning. I spent the next 2 years learning kintsugi, learning ceramics, learning that creation is an act of defiance. That beauty is a form of testimony, that when the world tries to shatter you, the most radical thing you can do is gather up your pieces and make yourself whole again. Not despite the cracks, but because of them. The studio became my home. Lainey became my teacher. And Theo Grant, the quiet studio technician who rarely spoke but always noticed, became something like a guardian. One afternoon, after I'd been working late on a series of bowls for my portfolio, Theo appeared beside my wheel. "You're here a lot," he observed. "I don't have anywhere else to be." He nodded, didn't pry, just stood there, watching me work. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass key. "This opens the studio," he said. "And this one opens the supply cabinet. And this one opens the file room where we keep the administrative records." He set them on a ring and handed it to me. "Why?" I asked. "Because you've earned it. Skill gives you permission. Your work speaks for you. When Lainey and I aren't here, you still have the right to be." I looked at the keys in my palm. They were small, ordinary. But they represented something extraordinary. Trust, access, the belief that I could be responsible for something valuable. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me. You did the work." That night, I sat in my apartment and looked at 3 things I'd collected. The fragment of my broken bowl, now mended with gold. A copy of my juvenile court record, which my social worker Alana had given me when I aged out of the system. And the keys Theo had given me. 3 objects, 3 forms of power. The first taught me that damage could be transformed. The second taught me that documentation is destiny. The third taught me that when you do the work, when you show up, when you prove yourself, people notice. And they grant you access. I didn't know it yet, but I would need all 3 of these lessons very soon. Because 7 years after my parents signed the papers that made me the county's responsibility instead of theirs, they decided they needed me again. Not because they'd had a change of heart, not because they'd realized what they'd lost, but because I had something they needed, my name. And they thought, they truly, genuinely believed, that I would simply give it to them. They had no idea what I'd become in those 7 years. They had no idea that the girl who cried over a broken bowl had learned to mend fractures with gold. They had no idea that I kept records, that I read fine print, that I understood the law and wasn't afraid to use it. They thought I was still that 14-year-old raising her hand in court, begging to be kept. They were wrong. And when I was finished, they would understand, really understand, what it costs to abandon someone who learns to build themselves back stronger. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the day the letter arrived. The letter came on a Tuesday in March, forwarded from my old county caseworker address to my studio apartment. The envelope was expensive, cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind of paper that announces its own importance. In the upper left corner, embossed in gold, Mercer Outreach Trust. My hands went cold. I hadn't heard from my parents in 7 years. Not a birthday card. Not a Christmas text. Not even a message through a social worker asking how I was doing. 7 years of silence so complete it had become its own language. And now this. A formal letter from the family trust I barely remembered, addressed to Miss Alina Mercer, in script so perfect it had clearly been done by a professional calligrapher. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it while I made tea. Green tea, the kind Lainey drank in the studio, because it smelled like calm, and I needed something to keep my hands from shaking. The trust. I'd forgotten about the trust. When I was small, maybe 7 or 8, my parents used to talk about it over dinner. The Mercer Outreach Trust, a charitable foundation they'd set up when my father's tech consulting business had a particularly good year. The idea, they said, was to give back, to fund scholarships for underprivileged youth, to support arts programs in struggling schools, to be the kind of family that made a difference. My father, Victor Mercer, was the founder and public face. My mother, Elaine, served as treasurer. They hosted fundraising galas. They posed for photographs with scholarship recipients. They gave speeches about building legacy and lifting up the next generation. And then, 6 years after they created it, they gave up on their own child. The irony wasn't lost on me. I picked up the letter, felt its weight. Expensive paper for an expensive request. I already knew that much. Inside were 3 pages. The first was a letterhead with both my parents' names listed as trustees. The second was a formal notification of an upcoming trust board meeting. The third was a request for my signature on something called a retrospective beneficiary designation form. The language was dense, deliberately opaque, clearly written by an attorney who was paid to make simple things sound complicated. But I'd learned to read this kind of document. Years of poring over my own court records, my foster care files, my vocational scholarship contracts, I'd developed a fluency in bureaucratic doublespeak. What the letter actually said, beneath all the legal flourish, was this. The Mercer Outreach Trust was in trouble. There had been questions, unspecified, about administrative expenses and conflicts of interest. The IRS was circling, an audit was imminent, and in order to maintain their nonprofit status, they needed to prove that the trust's activities had legitimate familial oversight from multiple generations. In other words, they needed me to sign something that made it look like I'd been involved all along. They needed my name. They needed to use my existence, the daughter they'd abandoned, to legitimize a trust that had apparently been serving their interests more than its stated charitable mission. The letter ended with a line that made my jaw clench. We hope you'll consider this an opportunity to reconnect with your family heritage and contribute to the important work your parents have built. Family heritage. As if I'd inherited anything from them except trauma and trust issues. Contribute. As if I owed them anything. I read the letter 3 times. Then I took a photograph of every page. Then I filed the original in the folder I kept labeled Legal Mercer. Yes, I had a folder. I had several folders. I'd learned that documentation is survival, that paper trails are power, that the moment you stop keeping records is the moment someone else gets to write your story for you. I didn't respond to the letter. Not yet. Instead, I went to the studio. It was late, nearly 9 p.m., but I had keys, and the building was technically open 24 hours for enrolled students. The hallways were empty, fluorescent lights humming that particular frequency that sounds like loneliness. I unlocked the ceramic studio. The smell hit me immediately. Wet clay, kiln ash, the mineral scent of earth being transformed by fire. It was the smell of home. On my work table, I had 3 pieces in progress. The first was a large serving platter for my final portfolio, a commission piece that I was being paid actual money for. The second was a set of small bowls for the student exhibition. The third was personal. A vase I'd been working on for months, building up layers of glaze, trying to capture a specific shade of blue I'd seen in a photograph of Lake Erie at dawn. I didn't touch any of them. Instead, I went to the cabinet where Lainey kept her kintsugi supplies: gold powder, urushi lacquer, fine brushes, mixing trays. I took them to my table, spread them out, looked at them like a surgeon reviewing instruments before a delicate operation. Then I opened the small wooden box where I kept broken things. People think kintsugi is about fixing what breaks, but that's not quite right. It's about acknowledging the break, honoring it, turning fracture into feature. It's about saying, "This happened, and it matters, and I will not pretend otherwise." I selected a piece, a teacup that had cracked in the kiln during firing. The crack ran from rim to base, a clean split that had rendered the cup unusable. But it was still beautiful. The glaze had pooled in interesting ways. The shape was elegant. I mixed the lacquer and gold powder, stirred until the consistency was perfect. Not too thick, not too thin. Then, with the finest brush, I began to trace the crack. The first application is always thin, barely visible. It's just a bonding layer, a promise that more is coming. You have to wait for it to cure, sometimes days, before you can apply the next layer. Kintsugi teaches patience. It teaches that healing is not a single event, but a process, that you cannot rush transformation, that the visible gold you see on a finished piece is actually dozens of layers, each one applied with care, each one given time to set. I was on the 3rd layer when Lainey walked in. "Thought I might find you here," she said, not at all surprised to see me at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. "Couldn't sleep." She came over, looked at what I was working on. "Something happen?" I showed her the letter. She read it slowly, her expression shifting from neutral to concerned to angry. "They want you to sign this?" "They want me to backdate it. Look, the form is dated 3 years ago. They want me to make it look like I've been involved since I was 18. That's fraud. That's family." Lainey set the letter down, looked at me hard. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do. You're sitting here doing kintsugi at 10:30 at night. You always work with gold when you're planning something." She wasn't wrong. I set down my brush, looked at the partial golden line I'd traced along the crack. "They taught me something," I said quietly. "The people who raised me in the system, the caseworkers, the foster parents, the teachers. They taught me that everything has to be documented. Every conversation, every decision, every transaction. Because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And my parents think I'm still that scared 14-year-old who raised her hand in court and begged to be better. They think they can send me an official-looking letter and I'll just sign whatever they want because they're my parents, and I must still want their approval." "Do you?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I wanted them to want me. That's different. But I stopped waiting for that a long time ago. Now I just want them to understand what they did. I want them to see me, actually see me, as someone they created and then abandoned, And I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Lainey smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who'd lived through her own version of family trauma and had learned that survival sometimes looks like vengeance. Then document everything, she said, and when you're ready, make them answer for it. She left me to work. I stayed until 3 in the morning, applying gold to cracks, thinking about my parents, thinking about trust, the thing they'd named their foundation after and the thing they'd broken in me. The next day, I made 3 calls. The first was to Alana Brooks, my former social worker. She'd kept in touch over the years, mostly just check-in emails on my birthday, asking if I needed anything. She'd been the one to give me my court records when I aged out, explaining that most kids didn't know they had a right to their files. I need a certified copy of my emancipation paperwork, I told her. Why? Because I'm about to need proof that my parents legally severed their rights to me. There was a pause. Alina, what's going on? I told her about the letter. Don't sign anything, she said immediately. I'll get you the documents, and I'm going to give you a name, a lawyer who does pro bono work for kids who've aged out. She specializes in cases where biological families try to reestablish contact for financial reasons. That's a specialty? You'd be surprised how often it happens. Parents who wanted nothing to do with raising you suddenly get very interested when you inherit money, get a settlement, or in your case, when they need your name for something. The lawyer's name was Mara Collins. Alana emailed me her contact information within the hour. The second call was to the Cuyahoga County Records Office, where I requested official copies of all trust filings for the Mercer Outreach Trust. They were public record. Anyone could access them. Most people just didn't think to look. The third call was to the Student Services Office at Rust Belt Arts College. I had a scholarship, the kind that came with stipulations about how my name and image could be used for promotional purposes. I'd read that contract very carefully before signing it. I knew my rights. I need to verify something, I told the coordinator. If someone wanted to use my name or likeness for an event or publication I wasn't directly involved in, they'd need my explicit written permission, correct? Correct. Why? Just checking. Thank you. I hung up. Then I sat down with a legal pad and began to write. I made a timeline. Every interaction I could remember with my parents. Every broken promise. Every dismissal. Every moment they'd made me feel like I was too much trouble, too needy, too expensive, too complicated. But I also documented the facts. Dates, locations, witnesses, the name of the judge who'd overseen my case, the social workers who'd managed my placements, the court documents that showed exactly when and how my parents had terminated their rights. Documentation is destiny. I'd learned that, and I was about to teach it. 3 weeks later, I received a second letter. This one was less formal. Handwritten. My mother's cursive, which I recognized from old birthday cards back when she still pretended to care. Alina, we haven't heard back from you regarding the trust matter. This is time-sensitive. The board meeting is scheduled for May 15th, and we really need your signature before then. I know we haven't been in touch, and I'm sorry about that. Life got complicated, but you're still our daughter, and this is still your family. Please call me. Love, Mom. Love, Mom. As if love was something you could just sign your name to, regardless of whether you demonstrated it through action. I didn't call. Instead, I went back to the studio and finished the vase I'd been working on. The blue I'd been chasing had finally emerged. That particular shade of dawn over water, the color of hope, before the day has proven whether or not it's deserved. I glazed it with a clear overglaze, fired it, let it cool. Then I packed it carefully in bubble wrap and took it with me to my next appointment. Mara Collins had an office in a converted warehouse downtown. The kind of space that nonprofit lawyers use because the rent is cheap and the clients don't care about ambiance. They care about results. She was younger than I expected. 40 maybe. Sharp suit, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd seen every variation of human dysfunction and had stopped being surprised by it. "Show me everything," she said after brief introductions. I laid it out on her desk. The original abandonment paperwork, the trust letter, the bylaws I'd obtained from the county records, my research on nonprofit compliance regulations, the timeline I'd made. She read in silence for 20 minutes. Then she looked up at me with something like respect. "You did all this yourself?" "I had good teachers." Most people don't think to get their own court records. Most people definitely don't think to pull corporate filings. I'm not most people. No, you're not. She leaned back in her chair. "Okay, here's what's happening. Your parents have been using the trust as a personal piggy bank. They've been paying themselves administrative salaries that are way above nonprofit norms. They've been charging personal expenses as business costs, and they've been claiming family members, including you, as advisors and beneficiaries to make it look like there's oversight. But I've never been involved." "Exactly. That's fraud. And if they get you to backdate this form, you become complicit. They're essentially trying to make you an accessory after the fact." "So what do I do?" Mara smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You do what they taught you. You document everything, and then you make them face the consequences." She pulled out a fresh legal pad. "First, we send a cease and desist letter. You formally notify them that they do not have permission to use your name, likeness, or identity for any purpose related to the trust. Second, we notify the trust's board. I see from the filings that there are independent members, not just your parents, that there are compliance concerns that need to be addressed. Third, we suggest they conduct an audit. And fourth, this is optional, but I highly recommend it. We attend that board meeting in May." "I don't want to see them." "I know. But here's the thing about people like your parents. They're not afraid of their victims when those victims are silent. They're only afraid when their victims speak, when their victims show up, when their victims have lawyers and documentation and a willingness to make things extremely uncomfortable." I thought about that. Thought about my mother's handwritten note. "Love, Mom." What if I just ignore them? What if I don't sign anything and I don't engage? Then they'll forge your signature or claim implied consent or find some other workaround. People who are desperate enough to ask their abandoned child to commit fraud are people who won't stop at one crime. She was right. I knew she was right. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it. All of it." Mara drafted the cease and desist that afternoon. It was a beautiful document. Formal, precise, devastating. It cited specific laws. It referenced my abandonment case number. It made clear that I was not only refusing to participate, but actively objecting to any use of my identity. We sent copies to my parents, to the trust's board members, and to the Cuyahoga Arts Fund, which was the trust's primary institutional partner. The response came within 48 hours. My father called my cell phone directly. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Alina, this is your father. I don't know what kind of advice you're getting, but this lawyer letter is completely unnecessary. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to include you. This is your heritage. This is your family's legacy. And frankly, I'm disappointed that you'd turn this into something adversarial when all we're asking for is a simple signature. Call me back." His voice was measured, reasonable, the voice he used in business negotiations. The voice that had probably convinced hundreds of clients that he was trustworthy, competent, worth their money. But I heard the undertone. I heard the assumption that I was stupid, that I was being manipulated by outside forces, that I couldn't possibly have come to my own conclusions or made my own decisions. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going to let this go. That was the moment I decided. They wanted me to participate in their trust? Fine. I would participate, but on my terms, with my documentation, and with every fracture exposed and highlighted in gold. They wanted a legacy? I would show them what legacy actually looks like when you build it on broken promises. The board meeting was 6 weeks away. I had work to do. The Cuyahoga Arts Fund responded first. Their executive director, Ms. Diaz, called me directly, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking this. Institutional partners don't typically contact individual citizens unless there's a real problem. Missy Mercer, she said, her voice professional but concerned. I've received your attorney's letter regarding the Mercer Outreach Trust. I wanted to reach out personally to let you know that we take compliance issues very seriously. I appreciate that. Can you tell me more about your concerns? Off the record. Off the record. The phrase people use when they want information without accountability. On the record, I corrected. I believe my parents have been misrepresenting my involvement with the trust for years, and I have documentation to prove it. There was a pause. I see. Would you be willing to meet with me and share that documentation? Yes, with my attorney present. Of course. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. But before that meeting could happen, my mother showed up at my apartment. I was in the studio when the building manager called up. There's a woman here who says she's your mother? My heart did something complicated. Part skip, part drop, part freeze. Tell her I'm not available. She says it's urgent, family emergency. Of course she did. Of course there was suddenly an emergency after 7 years of silence. Tell her to leave a message. She's very insistent. Then tell her I'll call security if she doesn't leave the premises. I hung up, sat down on the floor of the studio, my back against the wall, and tried to control my breathing. Lainey found me like that 20 minutes later. Your mom's downstairs, she said gently. Building manager told me when I came in. You okay? No. Want me to tell her to leave? I already did. She's probably still down there. Lainey pulled out her phone, texted someone. Theo's going down. He's good at being quietly intimidating. If she's still there, she won't be for long. I nodded, grateful. Want to talk about it? She wants my signature. She's probably panicking because I sent that cease and desist. Good. Is it, though? Part of me feels, I don't know, guilty? Like I'm being cruel. Lainey sat down beside me on the floor. Let me tell you something about family, she said. Real family, the kind that matters, doesn't abandon you when you're 14 and then show up 7 years later asking for favors. Real family doesn't make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Real family doesn't treat you like a problem when you need them and then treat you like a resource when they need you. She's still my mother. Biologically, yes, but biology isn't magic. DNA isn't destiny. She made a choice 7 years ago. Multiple choices. A whole series of choices that communicated, you are not worth my effort. And now she's making another choice, to treat you like a tool instead of a person. You don't owe her anything. I knew she was right, but knowing and feeling are different countries with no shared border. I keep thinking about this kintsugi piece I'm working on, I said. This cup that broke in the kiln, and I'm filling the cracks with gold, making it beautiful. But the thing is, it's still broken. The gold doesn't undo the crack. It just makes the crack part of the story. That's the point. But what if the story is ugly? What if the crack is so deep that no amount of gold can make it beautiful? Lainey considered this. Then you're not making it beautiful, she said. You're making it honest. And sometimes honest is more valuable than beautiful. Theo appeared in the doorway. She left, he reported. But she left this. He handed me an envelope. My name in my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I put it in my bag, unread, while Theo and Lainey carefully didn't comment. We worked in silence for a while, the three of us at our respective stations, the familiar rhythms of the studio providing a kind of ambient comfort. The wheel, the kiln, the quiet scrape of tools on clay. Eventually, Theo spoke. "You know why I gave you those keys?" he asked. I looked up. Theo rarely spoke about personal things. Questions from him were gifts. Because I'd proven myself? No, because you'd proven that you didn't need proving. You showed up. You did the work. You didn't ask for permission or validation. You just made things, because making things is who you are. That's rare. Most people need someone to tell them they're allowed to be who they are. He went back to his work. The point is, he added quietly, people who know who they are don't need signatures from people who never saw them in the first place. I sat with that for a while. That night, in my apartment, I finally opened my mother's letter. It was 2 pages, handwritten. Her handwriting had gotten shakier. Age, or stress, or maybe just the weight of what she was trying to say. Alina, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't understand why you hired a lawyer or why you're making this so complicated. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to fix a mistake. The truth is, the trust has some problems. Not big problems. Not illegal problems. Just paperwork problems. The IRS is asking questions that we don't have good answers for, and we need to show that the trust has always been about family, about passing values to the next generation. You're that next generation. You're our daughter. We made mistakes. I know we did. The divorce was hard on everyone, and we didn't handle it well. But that doesn't mean you're not family. That doesn't mean you're not a Mercer. Please, just sign the form. Come to the meeting. Help us fix this. Afterward, we can talk. We can have dinner. We can rebuild. But right now, I need you to understand. If this trust gets audited and shut down, if we lose the house because it's collateral for trust loans, if your father and I face legal problems because of this, that's on you. That's your choice. I know you're angry. You have a right to be angry. But please don't let your anger destroy something we've built for good. The scholarships we've given out, those are real. The programs we've funded, those matter. Kids who needed help got help because of this trust. Don't tear that down just to punish us. Mom. I read it 3 times. Each time, a different emotion. First hurt, then anger, then something colder and more clarifying. She'd done it again. The same thing they'd done in court 7 years ago. Made it about them. Made me responsible for their problems. Framed their mistakes as my burden. That's on you. That's your choice. No. No. It wasn't. I took out my phone and called Mara. I need you to expedite the records request. I said, I want every filing, every tax return, every financial disclosure the trust has made in the last 7 years. That's a lot of documents. I'll read them all. Why? Because my mother just told me that kids got scholarships because of their trust. I want to know how many kids. I want to know how much money. And I want to know how much of the trust's money went to actual charitable work versus how much went into my parents' pockets. You think it's going to be bad? I think if it wasn't bad, she wouldn't be showing up at my apartment and leaving guilt trip letters. Mara laughed. It was a sharp, approving sound. All right, I'll pull everything. This is going to be expensive. Document retrieval, my time, the research. How expensive? She quoted a number that made my stomach drop. I can't afford that. Pro bono, remember? You pay what you can. The rest is on me. Consider it an investment in making sure people who abandon kids don't get to exploit those kids later. I could have cried. Instead, I said, "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If we do this, we do it right. That means you need to be prepared for what we might find, and you need to be prepared to go public with it if necessary." I'm prepared. No, you're not. Nobody ever is. But we'll get you there. The documents arrived 4 days later. 112 pages of financial filings, trust amendments, board minutes, and tax returns. Mara was right. I wasn't prepared. The Mercer Outreach Trust had, over the course of 7 years, distributed exactly $32,000 in scholarships to exactly 6 students. In that same period, my parents had paid themselves a combined salary of $380,000 for administrative services. They'd charged $57,000 in program expenses. That included things like golf club memberships, luxury hotel stays for donor cultivation, and a $17,000 sound system for my father's home office that was apparently necessary for virtual board meetings. They'd purchased a property for future program expansion that happened to be a vacation cabin on Lake Erie, held in the trust's name but used exclusively by them. And they'd taken out loans against the trust's assets, loans that were now in danger of default, which explained why the house was collateral and why they were panicking. My mother had been right about one thing: kids had received scholarships. But for every dollar that went to a kid, $12 went to my parents. This wasn't a charity. It was a tax shelter with a heartwarming mission statement. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, highlighting the most egregious expenses, cross-referencing dates, making notes. And I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is hot and loud and impulsive. This was colder, more patient, more certain. This was the feeling you get when you stop asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and start asking, "How do I make sure they can't hurt anyone else?" I made a spreadsheet. Because of course I did. 3 columns. Claimed charitable expense. Actual use. Evidence. I documented everything. Every discrepancy. Every personal expense disguised as program cost. Every self-dealing transaction that violated nonprofit law. When I was finished, I had a document that told a very clear story. The Mercer Outreach Trust was never about helping kids. It was about helping Victor and Elaine Mercer avoid taxes while maintaining a reputation for generosity. And they'd been willing to use my name, the daughter they'd abandoned, to legitimize it. I sent the spreadsheet to Mara. She called me within an hour. "This is worse than I thought." I know. This isn't just compliance issues. This is potential fraud. If the IRS sees this, if the state attorney general sees this, your parents could face criminal charges. Good. Alina, I need you to be sure about this. Once we start this process, we can't stop it. If we notify the relevant authorities, if we present this evidence, there's no taking it back. They didn't take back what they did to me. That's not the same thing, isn't it? They made a choice. They chose their comfort over my welfare. They chose money over me. And now they want me to choose their welfare over my integrity. Why should their choice be allowed but not mine? Mara was quiet for a moment. "You're right," she said finally. "You're absolutely right. I just wanted to make sure you understood the stakes. I understand them. I'm choosing them. Let's burn it down." Not burn it down. That's not how this works. We're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to hold them accountable. There's a difference. Fine. Let's hold them accountable. Okay. Here's what happens next. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the IRS and the Ohio Attorney General's office. I'm going to notify the board of directors that there are serious concerns that need to be addressed. And I'm going to send your parents one more letter, A final offer to resolve this privately before it becomes public. What kind of offer? They agree to step down from the trust. They repay the inappropriate expenses. They cooperate with an independent audit. And they agree, in writing, never to use your name or likeness without your explicit permission. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges and we keep the details confidential. And if they refuse? Then we go to the board meeting in May, we present all of this evidence publicly, and we let the chips fall where they may. They'll refuse. Maybe. But we have to offer. It's the ethical thing to do. I didn't care about ethics where my parents were concerned, but I trusted Mara's judgment. Fine, send the letter. She did. My father responded the next day. Not through a lawyer. Not in writing. He showed up at Rust Belt Arts College. The front desk called me. There's a man here asking for you. Says he's your father. My hands went cold again. Tell him I'm not available. He says he'll wait. Tell him I'll call security. He says he's not leaving until you talk to him. This was exactly the kind of entitled behavior I should have expected. Victor Mercer was a man who'd spent his life being able to solve problems by showing up and being insistent. He thought if he just appeared, if he just talked to me directly, he could make this go away. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I called Mara. My father's here. Where? The college. He won't leave. Don't engage, I'll handle it. He's creating a scene. This is my school, my workspace. I can't just... You're right. Okay, here's what you do. You go down there. You don't speak to him. You hand him a card with my number on it. You say one sentence. All communication goes through my attorney. Then you leave. That's it. That's it. Don't let him draw you into an argument. Don't let him make this emotional. Keep it legal. Keep it documented. I went downstairs. My father was in the lobby. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. Thinner. The man who'd stood with his back to me in that courtroom had been solid. Certain. This man looked diminished. For a second, I felt sorry for him. Then he saw me and his expression shifted to relief, and something like victory, and the sympathy evaporated. Alina, thank God. We need to talk about... I handed him Mara's card. All communication goes through my attorney. I turned to leave. You can't be serious. I'm your father. I stopped. Turned back. No. You were my father. Then you went to court and signed papers that said you weren't anymore. You don't get to choose when that counts and when it doesn't. We were going through a hard time. Your mother and I had a choice. Every day for 7 years. And every day you chose not to call. Not to write. Not to show up. You don't get to show up now just because you need something. His face hardened. Everything we built. Everything we worked for. You're going to destroy it out of spite? No. You destroyed it out of greed. I'm just documenting it. I left him standing there. My hands didn't shake until I got back to the studio. Then they shook so hard I had to sit down. Lainey appeared with tea. Said nothing. Just sat beside me while I cried angry, helpless tears that I hated myself for crying. You did the right thing, she said eventually. It doesn't feel right. It will. When? Later. After you've won. After you've proven that you're not the person they thought they could use. After you've shown them what it costs to treat people like assets. I wiped my eyes. Is that what kintsugi is? Proving something? No. Kintsugi is about transformation, but sometimes before you can transform, you have to break completely. You have to let the old form shatter so the new form can emerge. She picked up one of my pieces, a bowl I'd been working on, not yet fired. This is fragile right now. If I dropped it, it would break. But after it goes through the kiln, after it's tested by fire, it becomes something stronger. Not unbreakable, but strong enough to hold what it's meant to hold. What am I meant to hold? Your own story, your own name, your own sense of who you are. That's what this is about. Not revenge, reclamation. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I was becoming something stronger instead of just something harder. But in that moment, sitting in the studio with my face wet and my hands still shaking, I mostly just felt tired. The board meeting was 3 weeks away. I had no idea if I'd be strong enough to face them, but I was going to try. The meeting was scheduled for May 15th at 10 a.m. in the Cuyahoga Arts Fund conference room. I didn't sleep the night before. Tried everything. Tea, no screens, breathing. But at 2 a.m. I gave up and went to the studio. It was empty. Just me and the quiet. The blue vase was finished. The platter in its final firing and the cracked bowl, now veined with gold, was ready. I held it to the light, the fracture glowing like a bolt of truth. The gold didn't fix it. It made the break visible, meaningful. That was my task tomorrow. Not to fix, but to make them see. At 8, Mara picked me up. Sharp suit, hair tied back. You ready? No. Good. Nervous means you understand the stakes. On the drive, I asked, why do you do this? You could make more doing corporate law. When I was 16, my parents kicked me out for being queer, she said. Teachers, librarians, shelter workers, they were my family. When I see parents trying to use their children as shields, I take it personally. You don't owe them forgiveness. You owe yourself honesty. We arrived early. Ms. Diaz greeted us. The board includes your parents, plus 3 independents, a judge, a CPA, and a nonprofit director. They take governance seriously. At 9:55, we entered the main room. My parents looked smaller, older. My mother's hair was silver, carefully styled. My father seemed hollow. Alina, my mother began. Mrs. Mercer, Mara cut in. All communication goes through me. Mr. Harrison, the chair, opened the meeting. Concerns about the trust's compliance? Mara laid out the evidence. Inflated salaries, personal expenses, misuse of assets, false filings, and the attempt to backdate documents under my name. The room fell silent. Dr. Patel scribbled notes. Mrs. Chen's face went pale. My mother cried quietly. My father stared blankly. We were going to fix it, he said. You meant to make your daughter complicit, Mara replied. We just wanted oversight, my mother stammered. You wanted to make your abandoned child responsible for your fraud, Mara said. My father snapped. We made a choice that was best for everyone. Something in me hardened. No, I said. You made a choice that was easiest for you. He glared. You were angry, out of control. I was 14, a child who needed help. You gave up instead. My mother whispered. We tried. For how long? Until it got inconvenient? I pulled the gold-filled bowl from my bag and set it on the table. Do you know what kintsugi is? She shook her head. It's the art of repairing with gold. The cracks become the story. I turned the bowl. You had one like this. I broke it when I was 8. You said I ruined something beautiful. This is that bowl. I kept the pieces. I pointed to the gold vein. You wrote that you wanted to put gold along the cracks. But you meant using my gold, my name, to hide your damage. That's not how healing works. You have to mend your own. Mr. Harrison asked gently. Ms. Mercer, what do you want? I want them to step down from the trust, repay the funds, and submit to an audit. Real oversight. Real accountability. My father's voice cracked. And if we do, then what? Then you've done the bare minimum. Taken responsibility. Will you forgive us? He asked. I thought of 14-year-old me, standing in court, begging to be seen. I'll forgive you for being human, I said. But not for 7 years of silence, Not for only remembering me when you needed something. That's not forgiveness, he muttered. No, it's honesty. Mrs. Chen broke the tension. I move that the trust adopt Ms. Collins's recommendations. Seconded, Dr. Patel said. Mr. Harrison looked at my parents. Do you agree? My mother nodded. My father sagged. Fine. The motion passes, Mr. Harrison said. Meeting adjourned. As papers shuffled, my mother reached out, touching the bowl. It's beautiful, she whispered. No, I said. It's honest. I left it on the table, a statement more than a gesture. You'll have to mend your own cracks. Outside, sunlight cut across the parking lot. Mara asked, How do you feel? Tired. Justice is exhausting, she said. But they can't use you anymore. You changed. That's what matters. 3 days later, an email from my father arrived. I read the meeting minutes. I understand now. I'm sorry. I stared at it, then replied, I received your email. Because some bridges shouldn't be rebuilt. Some fractures stay part of the structure. The only honest thing is to acknowledge them and move forward. And I was moving forward. The scholarship announcement came a week later. The announcement was set for June 3rd at the Rust Belt Arts College Showcase. Months of work, portfolio pieces, late nights, the kintsugi workshops had led here. The Emily and Noah Creative Sovereignty Scholarship, named for 2 foster siblings who joined our free weekend ceramics classes. Emily loved glazing. Noah sculpted emotions out of clay. They never spoke much about their lives, but I recognized that hunger for solidity, for something real, something that couldn't be taken away. When Mara said part of the trust settlement would fund a new scholarship, I already knew the name. For young artists defining themselves outside traditional families, I told her. Kids in foster care, kids who've chosen their own names. I like it, she said. Recipients must be nominated by a mentor, not family. They'll submit one piece and a statement on what sovereignty means to them. No strings, just, we see you. Mara smiled. You're building what you needed when you were 14. No, I said. I'm building what I got, from Lainey, Theo, and you. I'm just making it official. The college gave me the main gallery. 15 pieces, functional pottery, sculptures, and at the center, the bowl, blue ceramic, gold lacquer. My mother's bowl, remade. The label read, Gold along the crack, the first break, the first repair. The show was called Sovereignty. By 6 people filled the room, students, teachers, strangers. I stood in the corner, uneasy in the dress Lainey had insisted on. Putting art on display always felt like exposing your diary. Every piece carried a memory. The night I couldn't sleep. The morning I felt whole again. The kids debating glaze colors. At 7, Ms. Diaz spoke. Tonight, we celebrate Alina Mercer and announce the first Emily and Noah Creative Sovereignty Scholars. Applause. Emily and Noah sat front row, unaware. The first scholarships, $5,000 each, go to Emily Martinez and Noah Grant. Gasps, then tears. You named it after us? Emily whispered. For us, I said. For everyone who's had to build themselves without a blueprint. After the crowd's cheers faded, I saw her, my mother, standing at the doorway. I hadn't invited her. She looked uncertain, almost fragile. You came, I said. I wanted to see your work. We stood in silence, 7 years compressed into one breath. It's beautiful, she said softly. Thank you. And the scholarship? That was kind. It wasn't kind, I replied. It was right. She flinched, then nodded. You were right, Alina. We can't borrow your healing. No, you can't. Can we start over? I thought for a long moment. We can't start over. Only start from here. You're people who made choices that hurt me and later took responsibility. I don't hate you. I just don't trust you. But I'm not carrying anger anymore. My door isn't open or closed. It's available on my terms. That's fair. It's honest. She handed me an envelope. A letter. No requests. Just an apology. Thank you. And the bowl. Could I keep it? Why? As a reminder of what I broke, of what you fixed. It's yours, I said. But it's not a symbol that everything's okay, just a mended bowl. Nothing more. I understand. She left. No hug, no promises. Just truth. Later, with Lainey and Theo, I exhaled. You did good, Theo said. I just told the truth. That's doing good? Lainey smiled. We drank tea, surrounded by quiet clay dust and cooling kilns. Did you know? I asked. When you saw me crying over that broken bowl, did you know I'd end up here? Lainey shook her head. I knew you were hurting. I knew you needed something to hold on to. But no one could have known you'd become this. Except you. Theo added, You chose yourself. That's sovereignty. I thought about that 14-year-old girl in court. How much I wanted to tell her she'd survive, that someday she'd turn pain into art. But the only way forward was through. An unread email from my father waited in my inbox. I opened it. I understand now what we did. I'm sorry. I replied. Thank you for apologizing. I'm working on understanding too. That's all either of us can do. Then I closed the laptop, picked up a piece of clay, centered it on the wheel, began. Because sovereignty isn't a single triumph, it's a practice. 1,000 small choices to keep showing up, to create, to define yourself again and again. The wheel hummed, my hands found rhythm. Outside, the river whispered, patient, steady, shaping stone not through force but persistence. I thought about gold, how it fills cracks without hiding them, about names, how the act of naming yourself is the purest art form, about family, how sometimes the truest love is the freedom to walk away. Clay spun beneath my hands, raw, alive, becoming. The pilot light in the kiln burned low and steady. I stared at it, smiling. That was me now, not always burning, but always ready, always capable of turning broken things into something whole. The night deepened, the building fell silent, but I stayed. I had time, I had keys, I had work to do, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone's permission to take up space, to exist exactly as I was. That was enough. That was everything.